We just sit here waiting.
Always, right?
So now that we're live, I want to welcome everybody to another final episode for 2021 of Cruel Justice. Today, I have my host Jennie with me and my great staff leader for me. Um, and we're going to reflect back some on the year 2021 with us here at Witness to Innocent and talk about some of the things that's going around and some of the things that we're being involved. Um, Before I want to start, I want to thank everyone that has donated to us this year, especially our donors. I want to thank our great board. We've been pushing, and there's always great improvements. And our great executive director, Kirk Bloodsworth. Um, and I want to thank everybody who's have shared these videos and continue sharing these videos because these videos have helped many people out in situations, and we are so thankful for y'all's support. So today, with the assistance of Jennie, actually, I'll be assisting Jennie. Um, we're gonna bring up a new format of uh, slideshows, and we're going to talk about it and things like that. Since we're live, I don't know if we can see the comments, but I miss being able to ask and answer questions. But before we kick the slide off, Jennie, you want to tell people who you are? I
Sure.
mean, the world should know because I always be talking about my Jennie, you know. So
Yes, totally. Thank you. Hi, I'm Jennie and Jennie Sheeks. I'm the Director of Development and Communications at Witness to Innocence. And I get to work behind the scenes on all of the things that Herman and the other death row exoneree members of Witness to Innocence are out there doing every day to abolish the death penalty and stop wrongful conviction and get just compensation for exonerees and all the other campaigns that the members of Witness to Innocence have been involved in. And I'm excited for this 2021 year in review show where we can look back when we were preparing for the show. I was like, oh, I'm not sure what all we did this year. And then I realized that all the things that happened this year feel like maybe they were last year. It's just been such a full, amazing year. I couldn't believe it was all actually 2021. So we have a lot of stuff to look back and reflect on.
So, Jenny, um, one of the great things that I would like to point out is, I was thanking everybody, but I want to point out our great staff. This year has been a full year with the beginning, COVID-19, and trying to make adjustments to all the exonerees needs and things like that, and keeping the program running to so we don't go down. And y'all came up with these virtuals. We came up with the Cruel Justice show, and I just want to thank everybody um, and the staff for the great work they've done this year. Um, so, what is our first slide?
Well, our first slide is in memory of Wiley Bridgman and Damon Thibodeau. We did lose two of our beloved members this year. And that's our deep sadness of the year. And so we wanted to start our slideshow tonight, remembering them and commemorating them. Um, Wiley Bridgman is a wonderful, beloved member who passed away this summer. He was on death row in Ohio, along with his brother Kwame Ajamu and their friend Ricky Jackson. And Kwame is our board chair. And so thank you to Kwame, as always, for his leadership of Witness to Innocence as board chair, and a repeated condolences for this significant loss to him of his beloved brother. And we were still reeling from that loss when Damon Thibodeau suddenly passed away later in the summer, just a couple months later. And Damon was on death row in Louisiana. And has been very, very active, speaking out against the death penalty and raising awareness in the years since he's been home. And I don't know, Herman, if you wanted to share any memories or comments in memory of Wiley or Damon.
Actually, I do. I remember what it was 2-3 years ago when we went to Puerto Rico for the gathering. Me and him had an interesting talk. He was down to earth person. You can look at his picture. He kind of looked like look like a hippie, but one of the cool people type surfers type persons. And we sat down and we talked for a while. And at first I was kind of intimidated by him when I first met him. Like, hey, this dude here. But yeah, when you sit down and you really talk to him, he was a great, outstanding person.
Absolutely. And, we continue our work in their honor. And I guess we can move on to the next slide and start talking about the work we did this year. So the very first thing we did this year was that actually around this time last year, in the week between Christmas and New Year's, we launched the I'm Living Proof series of short videos that we worked on with photographer Martin Scholler. And we're going to show you one of those videos, which is of Herman. But we launched those at the very, very end of 2020. And so we saw them take off in the earliest months of this year. Just give our Allison a second to get
And the funny
playing.
thing is I actually have that very shirt on today.
Look at that.
I actually have that very shirt on today. So
it's your favorite shirt. It's funny.
But yeah, that it was such an honor that Martin came to us with this National Geographic thing. And it was what it captured was so amazing. I know me and a lot of other guys talked about it, and I think this is like the hottest thing that we ever have done for most of us. But I'm gonna let you see the video first.
The day that I heard the judge say, "We, the people, sentence you to die by lethal injection," I couldn't understand. How can I be sentenced to death for something I didn't do? I've been released from death row since 2009. When you get exonerated, you're very limited to what you can do. Why can't I get a job? Why can't I not rent an Airbnb if I want to take my family on a vacation? When they do the background check, it still shows up, even though it shows that I was exonerated later. When they put it on our record, they should be able to take it off. But I'm a strong believer that what happened in the past is the past. Rehabilitation does exist. It's going to take some work, but it's giving a person a second chance. Since I've been exonerated, I get my real joy from speaking about wrongful convictions and making changes to the system. Help us change their view on the death penalty.
That was a very, very grateful time to do that presentation there, and Martin actually took time to really capture the best in each of us when that happened. And for people to know that, you should go on YouTube, witnesses to YouTube, and you can see videos from other exonerees that has also done these very same videos with Martin, with the National Geographic. And I think it was the March edition of 2021 National Geographics. We actually featured many pages in the National Geographic concerning the death penalty and us exonerees.
Well,
And
hold
how
on, hold on. That's our next slide. We're gonna go there next.
Okay,
So hold
so,
on.
okay.
We'll go back. We have it chronologically. So don't jump
Okay.
into March when we haven't even got to February or January yet.
Are we doing it by months?
Yeah, we got it in order for you. We made
Oh,
you
see,
a
I
slideshow in
aware.
order.
I wasn't aware of that.
But
So,
Allison, can you go back one? Can you go back? I
okay.
just wanted to give a shout out because you saw it in the video on Herman's sweatshirt for Represent Justice. So the On Living Proof video series, and yeah, Herman, you're absolutely right. People came on to YouTube or onto our website, and I bet Marnie is posting the links right now in the chat. But this film series, there's 9 short films, and it was funded by the Art for Justice Fund through our collaboration with Represent Justice. And so big shout out to Represent Justice and their partnership and Art for Justice Fund for making this film series happen. It's sort of combined in our hearts and minds with the whole National Geographic thing that happened in March, because it was all with Martin, and he is the National Geographic photographer. But we're going to talk about March of March. So the next thing that happened in 2021 was that we had a new president. And that president ran on a platform saying that he did not support the death penalty. And the one reason on his criminal justice platform that Biden said he did not support the death penalty was the chance of executing an innocent person. And so we've sent countless letters. We did a sign-on letter. We had a petition, actually 2 different petitions on our website. And I think you'll see some links in the comment about that. Asking Biden to commute federal death row, stop federal executions, and also urging Congress to abolish the federal death penalty. So that was pretty much a change of pace, huh, Herman, from the killing spree we saw at the end of 2020.
Yeah, with Biden stepping in like that, at first we was very questionable about what he would be doing on the death penalty. It's been a slow process now, but I'm sure we're still on his agenda right now.
Yeah, I think we're trying to say yay to everything that's happened, but saying it's not quite enough. So I think there's a sort of a moratorium right now where executions aren't happening, but that we know that can change at any time and with any administration. And so we really want to see the commutation of the sentences of the people currently on federal death row. And of course, we want abolition at the federal level and at every state. So,
and I think that's also helped us with this year here. It has been the lowest executions. It's been 11 total executions throughout the United States. And I think with Biden taking that side, it helped prevent further executions this year. And it hasn't been that low since 1988.
Wow, that's a big deal. I didn't even realize that. That's wonderful. I think we're ready for our next slide. Now you can talk about National Geographic. We made it to end of February, beginning of March. It launched online first, and then it was in the March issue. But go ahead if you want to talk about what this whole thing was about.
I'll let you go ahead and take a cover on that one.
Okay, all right. Well, we have a lot of different slides to slide through on this one, but basically, as we've mentioned, Martin Scholler, who is a photographer and has had all of a lot of his work published in National Geographic as well as all other amazing places, had come with us to Puerto Rico to the gathering that Herman mentioned earlier in 2019, and did these close-up portraits, which is his sort of one of his signature styles. And he's, photographed famous people, presidents and movie stars and famous musicians, and also lots of everyday people like you and me. And he has books of these close-up photos, and they're just, really looking at a very raw and real look into people and evoke a lot of emotions. And so he did that with our death row exoneree members. And then in addition to just the still photos, that is his style, he also wanted to try a new thing, which was to do this moving portraits. And so he had done audio interviews, and he created these moving portraits where it's a video still, and then the audio is behind it. And so we're going to see one of Ray Crone, Witness to Innocence co-founder Ray Crone, now when it comes back on here.
It's been used in a few cases, been talked about. It was very difficult to describe and for people to understand, for juries to understand, even for prosecutors. The experts in the field had testified that this was not my DNA. The prosecutors tried to confuse the jury, and the jury just said guilty, and everything just froze. My vision just kind of come into a tunnel, to a small little hole that I'm looking down through, and I see the jurors, and they're wiping tears from their eyes, and I see the judge with his head down, and I'm looking around. Everything's just little small photographs. It's just like little pictures blinking. It's all slowed down, and my attorney hanging on me said, "Oh my God, Ray, how did they not see the truth? I can't understand their decision." And I look over at the prosecution side and the victim's family side, and they're jumping up and down and celebrating. I'm stunned. I'm shocked. I'm frozen. It's like, no, back up, rewind. This can't be happening. This isn't real. And I was snapped back to reality pretty quick, because within just a few moments, I heard the most horrible scream, this wail from my mom and my little sister, also not even 5 feet behind me, sitting. And I turn around to see the look in their face. They're crying, they're screaming, "Mom, don't cry, Amy. It's all right, I'll be okay, don't worry." They weren't just doing this to me, they were doing it to my family.
That was deep. That is such an amazing way to get a message out, staring in the person's eyes, as you hear that voice, seeing their face still and moving. And it's so amazing how he captured that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And he did an installation of these moving portraits. So the portrait itself was larger than life, like taller than a person. And then the audio was sort of surround sound in the room. And that installation first, before the, I'm trying to think when and where, it was in Germany, right? And then another installation here at the Photographic Museum in New York. That's where I got to go see it. And then he posted it on his Instagram, and on, some of them got, I don't remember the statistics, 1.2 million views or something. I feel like it was pretty large numbers of the views, but I don't remember exactly. But you can look on the Instagram and try to see. But this whole collaboration with Martin was amazing. And the National Geographic piece, I do want to give a shout out to National Geographic, and their editor, Susan, for making it happen and being so committed to bringing this issue to light, of the issue of innocence and the death penalty. And if you, I know we're posting links, if you check out the article itself, the Death Penalty Information Center provided statistics that they created these amazing infographics out of. And the writer, Philip Morris, was this incredible writer out of Ohio, this was all new content to him, and he really jumped in. we're like friends now, talking, sending each other articles and talking every now and then. He's in my heart, and I know the exonerees are in his heart at this point, having heard everybody's stories and writing just such an amazing piece. And it was the largest size feature that National Geographic does, in terms of the spread, the number of pages and the number of photos and just space that it took in the magazine. So it was a really big deal for us, and we're just so happy about it.
I have a question, Jenny. I'm gonna, if I remember right, I'm just don't want to quote it. Disney has some involvement in this also, correct?
Well, so I don't know the details, and we're live on TV, so I don't want to get it wrong, but the Disney Corporation and National Geographic have an affiliation. And so thank you to Disney too for
yeah, that's what I was saying. I wanted to actually thank Disney also for being involved in this. And that's again to tell people that, don't be afraid to get involved with Witness to Innocent. We have big companies involved with us. So,
That's right.
some people like, well, what is Witness to Innocent? Please feel free to go on our website, and just, even if you sign up for the newsletters.
Mm-hmm. I think we can jump back to the slideshow now. It might take a little bit of a technical moment to get, oh no, we are here. Okay. So other stuff we've worked on this year, as always, are abolition campaigns. We have a large number of target states we worked on, but we're just highlighting these 3 states that we provided testimony in. So Ray Crone testified for the legislature in Wyoming. Kwame testified, I think, more than once in Ohio. There's a big campaign going on in Ohio. They have a 2-year legislative cycle. And so we're really, really hoping for abolition in 2022. And if you're in Ohio or know people in Ohio, definitely there's links on our website, and maybe we can post them in the comments. We have an abolition campaigns section of our website, and then there'll be different states, and you can connect directly with the call to action in Ohio, and support what Ohioans to stop execution are doing there. And then Kirk testified in Virginia, and it's okay, you can go ahead to the next one. We're really psyched to be a part of Virginia abolishing the death penalty in March. So, the first Southern state to abolish the death penalty, huge deal. Really meaningful that the governor himself mentioned innocence and the issue of innocence as one of the reasons. And I think, Herman, you probably have seen this in all the states that you've worked in. And I know Kirk, our executive director, Kirk Bloodsworth, mentions it all the time. And I've heard Ray say it actually in one of his videos, that the governors, when they abolish the death penalty or when they make a moratorium, almost always mention the issue of innocence as one of the major reasons why they made their decision. And legislators who vote for it in support of it always mention it as well. And so we know how important the voices of death row exonerees are in this work. There's so many reasons to abolish the death penalty. We're against the death penalty regardless of innocence, but we use the issue of innocence, and our exoneree members are so good at using their stories and the issue of innocence to open the door to those conversations and to provide stories that people, really could never forget and can't be argued with. You really can't have a death penalty if there is going to be a risk of executing innocent people. And we saw that have an impact in Virginia. We got the image on screen of Kwame Ajamu's I'm Living Proof video because we were really excited about the collaboration that happened in Virginia. So in the last weeks before the vote, we got a call from folks in Virginia, some of our partners, who said, hey, we have one group that's willing to give us some money and another group who's willing to put together a digital ad that we can run. But the only thing we don't have is footage, and you guys have footage. Could we use some footage? And so we got in touch with Kwame and said, hey, is it all right if we use some of the raw footage from your I'm Living Proof video and give it to these folks in Virginia to make an ad? And so they made, I think it was like a 10-second digital ad. I think it was a very, very short digital ad. The ad, they ran it in like targeted to the regions where they really needed a vote in support of abolition. And the ad firm, I believe, said that it was one of the most like the highest click-through rates of a digital ad that they had run. So it really had good results. And obviously we were just honored and thrilled to be one part in the work that everyone on the ground in Virginia and all the other movement partners have been doing to finally bring abolition there. So huge success, one state at a time. This year it was Virginia. So next year it's Ohio, right? Then Florida, Herman.
Man, I would love for DeSantis to join the group, but unfortunately Florida follows Alabama, Texas, California, and that's one of the bad things about it. But I do believe that soon we're gonna hit one of those states, and when they fold, all the rest of them just follow the suit.
Well, Virginia's going to be the first one leading the way in the South. So there we go. We can move on to the next slide. So other issues that we worked on this year, in addition to abolition, we worked on qualified immunity. So in New Mexico, there was a bill, HB4, the New Mexico Civil Rights Act, and it had inside of it, the meat of it was about not having qualified immunity for certain employees of the state. So I think it gets more detailed and I don't have it off the top of my mind, but this is a really important issue for wrongful conviction, because, you know, you'll have people almost losing their lives, or potentially innocent people having been executed, and the mishaps, intentional or unintentional, that happen along the road to create those wrongful convictions. You know, there's no accountability, in part because of qualified immunity. And so Ron Kiney, our member and board member, who was on death row in New Mexico, was really central, working, you know, in touch with the strategy teams who were thinking about how to get this bill passed, and providing his story and his testimony. And then Juan Melendez came in at the last minute when we needed some written testimony at one of the final hearings, because he currently lives in New Mexico and he was on death row in Florida, along with Herman. And so Juan came in at the last minute. We were working on his written testimony, I think at midnight one night. He called me on the phone and waking up my husband. So it's like, what are you doing? Oh, I have to read this testimony out loud with Juan and make sure we got it all right. And so it was exciting to be a part of it. And I think it'll be good legislation for other states to follow, for sure.
I just want to add to that is that, you know, here, the gift of being exonerated in many different states is that we have the ability to tell our stories, and our stories have the ability to make people think. So when working on bills, when working on a campaign, you know, that's our job at Witness the Innocent, to actually go there and try to make a difference. Because one thing we found that, you know, just a normal person can go up there and tell, you know, this person was exonerated from death row. We got these big stats of numbers of exonerees from being exonerated. This is why the bill. But when they actually hear the story from a person that's been exonerated, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Next slide. And then another issue. So we work on abolition and we work on qualified immunity. We also work on compensation issues, which is a really, I know, why don't you speak first to the compensation issue? Because it's just impossible in Florida and so many other states to get just compensation after a wrongful conviction. And then we can talk about our success in Maryland.
Well, the biggest problem with most states with this compensation, they're putting bills on the table for compensation, but actually the bills usually be so complicated that, and just anybody that's exonerated can it'd be so complicated and hard for a person exonerated to even get the bill. For instance, here in Florida, we have a compensation bill. we at first we had the Clean Hand Act, meaning if you had a prior conviction uh, that don't have anything to do with what you were wrongfully convicted of, just a prior conviction, you wasn't qualified to receive compensation up under that bill. I spoke in the committee and we removed that. But then here now we have the challenge of actually, and this is in a lot of states, actually, we have to go back to the trial court and get what they call a certificate of innocence, which we have to actually prove our innocence. Now, at the beginning of trial, or when you first arrested, you're innocent until proven guilty. Then they sit here and wrongfully prove you guilty, and then force you to go back and prove you're innocent to get compensation. And for instance, in my case, I had a judgment from the Florida Supreme Court. My case is like first case in history where on direct appeal, all 7 judges ruled that I should have never even been convicted. But yet that ruling was not significant enough to please the compensation bill. So what we have to do with the compensation bills here around in the states is, around in the state, is try to get the legislature to make it where they will accept the wrongdoing to us and put a bill together to allow everyone to be compensated.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, wait, let's go back because I want to keep talking about Maryland. So we had this win this year in Maryland, and I want to just give a big shout out to Kirk Bloodsworth, our executive director. Kirk was on death row in Maryland. He was the first person to be exonerated from death row by using DNA evidence. He was, if you've heard his story already, he was on death row wrongfully. He was innocent, and he heard about this new thing called deoxyribonucleic acid, and he said, maybe that can prove my innocence. And so when he did get exonerated, I mean, he's just been a tireless worker to right the wrongs that put him on death row. And so he worked very, very hard to get the death penalty abolished in Maryland and succeeded at that. He's done a lot of advocacy for post-conviction DNA testing. So there's actually a federal fund in his name, the Kirk Bloodsworth Post-Conviction DNA testing program, which provides actual grants to pay for that DNA testing that can prove people's innocence. And that's a really important thing. It needs to get funded, in every budget. And Kirk is always, there at hand, ready to help support and advocate and tell his story to get that funding in place. And so compensation is just another issue there in Maryland, where he was showing up, testifying, doing interviews, speaking on behalf of it. And it was a very successful campaign. It was, I think, as compensation legislation goes, pretty fair and just levels of compensation. And so kudos to Kirk and everyone fighting for that in Maryland.
I'm glad to see a state taking action to make things like this happen.
Absolutely. So now we can go to the next slide. I just didn't want to miss out on talking about Maryland. So, you said a little while ago, Herman, about Disney. You're like, yeah, wasn't Disney? And just like, don't be afraid to get involved in this issue, whatever organization, business, or individual you are. And I think one of the really amazing leaders in that this year has been this campaign, the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, hashtag BizVerseDP. But you can find more about it. I'm sure we're posting links in the comments. It was it's affiliated or was founded by or thought of or supported by Richard Branson. And also pictured here is in the center is Celia Oluette. And yeah, Celia, Celia.
Yes,
and Sabrina Butler Smith, who is a member of Witness Innocence and a death row exoneree. from Mississippi. And so this picture is from South by Southwest when Celia moderated a fireside chat with Richard Branson and Sabrina as a part of the launch of the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice campaign. And if you look at their campaign, they have an incredible list of business leaders, CEOs from top companies. You're going to recognize the names and be impressed. I don't have them all in my head, but a growing list of business leaders joining with Richard Branson to say, we're against the death penalty. The death penalty needs to be abolished. So if you guys know, other businesses to spread the word to other CEOs, you can show them this and have them join in taking this stand, because that's how we're going to turn public opinion. The more people that are out there and outspoken against it.
When I think it was Tennessee, the first time I was in Tennessee, I met Cecilia. And we was at a national legislator, like I would say, when we had all these different businesses in there and things like that. And she was explaining to me how her organization is bringing business leaders in to stand up for abolishing the death penalty. And it's amazing that how when business leaders get in, it's just like faith leaders get in. We're people follows, and that also helps change the legislators' mind to say, okay, I want votes. So if I want votes, I need to get aboard.
Absolutely. All right, we can go to the next slide. So the two big campaigns we really poured our hearts into this year and last year are Rodney Reed and Julius Jones. And so Rodney Reed, as many people probably know, is on death row in Texas. I think he's been on death row for over 20 years. I don't have the stats in my head. In 2019, he came very close to an execution date, and Witness to Innocence and all of our death row exoneree members were working very closely with his campaign and with his family at rallies in DC and rallies in Texas. We did a letter delivery to the governor, and we had literally bought the tickets to go to the vigil that was going to be his execution. That's how close we were. That's where it looked like it was going. And there was an indefinite stay of execution calling for an evidentiary hearing, I believe. And so then that evidentiary hearing just got delayed and delayed and delayed through all of 2020. And so finally this summer, that evidentiary hearing happened in July, and Juan Melendez, who we were just talking about, who was on death row in Florida for 17 years. He flew out and joined the Reed family at a rally before the evidentiary hearing. And in combination with that, we did a t-shirt campaign pushing people to purchase t-shirts to support the campaign for Rodney Reed. And these are photos of our members in those t-shirts. I'll just quickly shout it out from the top corner. So we have Ray Crone, then Randall Padgett, then, help me out, Alfred Rivera. And then Juan is there with Rodney's brother, Roderick. And then Jeremy Sheets is the top right of that first column. Then down below, bottom column, we have Deborah Milkey, Kwame Ajamu, Paul House, Suja Graham, and his partner, Phyllis. And last but not least, in the bottom right corner is Ron Kiney. And one of the most amazing things about that hearing that Juan was at was that while it was going on, Rodney actually called in on Roderick's cell phone. And so Juan had a chance to speak directly to Rodney on the phone, tell him that the death row exonerees of Witness to Innocence are with him. And Juan told Rodney, you're going to be a miracle just like me. One day you're going to be on this side. And I thought those were very powerful and moving words.
I'll let you go ahead on to the next one,
Okay, we can.
because you done explained everything on
There you
that.
go. So, oh, well, announcing our new staff member, Deborah Milkey. And we don't always announce each and every new staff member, but this one is exciting because she is one of our members. And so Witness to Innocence has a real commitment to having exonerees, death row exonerees on our board and on our staff. As you know, our executive director is Kirk Bloodsworth, a death row exoneree. We have 3 other peer specialist staff, Randall Paget and Suja Graham and Derek Jameson. And then we had an opening for our administrative assistant position, and Deborah Milkey got the job. And so we're so psyched to have one of our members a part of our team in this way. And she's incredible. We're just really excited to have her. So wanted to give her a little shout out in the slideshow. She's one of only 2 women ever to be exonerated from death row.
And if you look at her smile and her eyes, you wouldn't believe that was be the woman that actually endured the wrong conviction. You wouldn't think she would actually be a person that would be selected for the death penalty.
Yep. It's hard to believe for a lot of people. A lot of you all, it's hard to believe what you went through. So we can move on to the next here. So next is Julius Jones. So this was another case of someone on death row that we were working to try to have proof of his innocence heard in court. Julius was really at the end. There was like no chance for any other hearings, and the evidence of his innocence had never been heard because of, technicalities and procedural issues barring presenting new evidence and stuff like that. And so it really came down to the a commutation hearing and a clemency hearing as the first times that he was able to have his legal team really present the his alibi that he was with his family, and other things that were really just messed up in his trial, if you want to find an articulate word for it. So the commutation hearing that happened, the Board of Pardons and Paroles in Oklahoma voted to recommend commutation. That vote went to the governor, and he decided not to do anything about it and not to make a decision. And then the Attorney General set an execution date for Julius Jones. And the governor said, well, when there's an execution date set, there'll be a clemency hearing. So I'm not going to decide on commutation. Let's just wait for the clemency hearing. All the while, of course, we're getting closer and closer to an execution date, which is torture for Julius, torture for the family. Julius got put on death watch, which is a whole nother set of, procedural things that happen inside of death row that are psychologically torturous to go through for both Julius and his family. And then the clemency hearing had the same result, where the Board of Pardons and Parole heard all the evidence and voted again, I think 3-1, to recommend clemency. They recommended clemency with the possibility of parole. And the governor waited and waited and waited again. There was no answer. And it was really, really nerve-wracking for all of us, but especially for the family and for Julius. And then finally on November 18th, thankfully, the governor did grant clemency to Julius, but he commuted his sentence to life without the possibility of parole, which is not what the board recommended in either time. And so there's still a fight to be had to bring Julius home. But that's, I'll turn it over to you because, Herman, the story to tell also is what did we do on behalf of the campaign? And we did a whole letter delivery to the governor and press conference in, I think, the 1st of September. And you were there. I see you in these photos. So
it was a very personal case for me. I got involved and I still remember the last time I went. I think you called me like 9 o'clock that morning and saying I had to be on a plane by 3 o'clock that afternoon. But one of the greatest things about this case is that so many people stood up. I have never seen the actions taken in an innocent case or any case where, you know, people responded so quickly. People responded so in numbers. You know, for instance, the petition was this small one day. The next week, it's over 1 million and some signatures. And the strategy of the governor, I really don't understand. But for me, it looked like he wanted to torture Julius Jones because it seems to me he has some type of ties to the victim family and to whether do right and understand that the family could be wrong also. You know, they only know what the police told them back then. And for them to prolong it to the last minute, the last few hours to make a decision, you know, I think more he was worried more. I think that he felt he needed to do the right thing and commute him and go with the recommendation or even suggest further hearings. But I think his hands was more worried about his political career and what votes he would get and what votes he won't get. So I think he wasn't having any real regards to Julius Jones' case. I think that he made the move he made because had he executed Julius Jones, I think his career would have been over as a politician.
Yep, that makes sense, definitely. And we'll just say in these pictures real quick. So obviously we got Herman. This was a press conference and a letter delivery that happened. And Gary Drinkard in the blue shirt, Juan Melendez. But I want to really point out Nancy Vollerson there in the middle with the photo of her brother. So Nancy Vollerson's brother, Greg Wilhoit, was a member of Witness to Innocence. He has passed away and we miss him terribly. And he was on death row in Oklahoma. So in addition to having Herman and Juan and Gary from out of state there in Oklahoma, it was really, I think, very powerful in terms of the press coverage we were able to get and the influence that might have held over the governor to have Nancy speaking out so strong on behalf of Greg and not letting anyone forget Greg and the other people who have been exonerated from death row in Oklahoma. She really, you know, we can't forget them, and that's the reason why you know, Julius and no one should be executed in Oklahoma. So really grateful to Nancy for being there and bringing Greg's memory forward in this work.
And I want to point out one other thing. You see the guy at the bottom, the Hispanic with the gray Julius Jones shirt? This guy actually makes these flags here, the innocent flag. I have one on my wall right here in the back of me now. He actually makes these. He was a farmer, and he learned about. He heard about this case and read up about how other people has been innocent and things, and he dedicated his time traveling from state to state, issuing those flags on his truck and donating them flags to people to help the innocent.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful, because I know I've seen that same flag in the background when I've done Zooms with Roderick Reed, with Rodney's brother. So clearly this gentleman and his flags are getting around. So that's really good. The other cases that we've sort of touched on this year, we've done everything that we could for the case of Purvis Payne from Tennessee, who was on death row, and we had some good news on his case, I think the same day or the next day, so very, very close in there when we got the news of Julius Jones's commutation from the clemency hearing, we also heard that Purvis Payne, the prosecutor or DA had declared that he would not be eligible for execution because of intellectual disability. And so we're glad, again, like Julius, that Purvis's life is spared, but there's still a road to go to prove his innocence and bring him home to his family. A case we're starting to get involved in is a woman named Melissa Lucio. And with this year's World Day Against the Death Penalty, which we'll be talking about, focusing on women, we started to learn more and to speak out about her case. But you can go to the active cases page on our website, and there's two bits of information there. One, it will be like the next 3 upcoming execution dates, so you can know, who's at risk of being executed and what can be done. And then below that, we have more detail about possible innocence. So cases of people who have strong evidence of innocence and are trying to prove their innocence and become exonerated. And so you can find out more about Melissa's case and other cases there. So we can go to the next slide. World Day Against the Death Penalty. That's what I was just talking about. So like I said, it was focused on women sentenced to death, an invisible reality. And so Sabrina Butler Smith and Deborah Milkey are the 2 women in the US who have been exonerated from death row. Deborah in Arizona and Sabrina in Mississippi. And so they did a lot of speaking events at a number of different places during the month of October, around the World Day Against the Death Penalty date of October 10th. We have down in the right corner, or left bottom corner, that is Martin Scholler, the photographer that we were shouting out earlier. And the moving portraits installation that we were describing got it also installed at Bryant University for World Day Against the Death Penalty. And so that's a photo from that event. And then bottom right corner is an event we did in collaboration with Pennsylvanians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And it was this wonderful, and I'm blanking on her name now, but top right corner was our host and our moderator and our initiator of this, who was a Girl Scout from Pennsylvania who wanted to have this webinar to talk about abolishing the death penalty in Pennsylvania. And next to her on the top row is the chairman of Pennsylvanians from the board of Pennsylvanians for Alternatives to Death Penalty. Below that is Ray Crone, who was originally from Pennsylvania, and he told his story of being exonerated. And in the bottom right corner is Representative Ryan. I'm trying to remember his name. And he is introducing legislation to abolish the death penalty. And we're really, really grateful to him for that. So that was a fabulous event too. And in addition to Representative Ryan showing up, we had, 6 or 7 other legislators from Pennsylvania come and have a pretty in-depth conversation about being on the same page and working together to abolish the death penalty in Pennsylvania. So that's a little synopsis of World Day Against the Death Penalty. Did you do anything for World Day, Herman?
I can't even quite remember, but I remember we did something for World Day because we also prepared with the Cruel Justice Show for the World Day, and I think we had to wear certain shirts for that day. I don't know. My mind heating up right now because I was looking at my next. I was trying to make sure what time my next meeting was after this.
What time is your next meeting?
No, I still got another hour, so
okay.
Take your time.
Okay, now I guess we're almost done. You did something for City of Lights this year. Did you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I just returned from Jacksonville, and I was up there at St. Joseph Bishop Church, Catholic Church in St. Augustine. The great thing about Cities of Light, it goes on everywhere. I used to love when it was City of Lights time because I get to go to Italy, but because of COVID, I've been having to stay home. But the great thing about City of Life is it's a day where all the cities, all the states throughout the world, people come together and light up candles for the abolition of the death penalty and those that's on death penalty, that's on death row, and those that has been executed. One of the great things, I was there with John Chick, who is the ex-Jaguar, Jacksonville Jaguar football player. You know, he's now the minister of that church. I spoke at John Bishop High School. It's like going to school. I understand now why I am so glad that I'm out of school now, because that day I had to wait and talk to students each period. And lunch, I still loved it. The lunch special, the lunch period, but it was tiresome. So, you know, I really enjoyed my time up there with City of Life.
That's wonderful. All right, we can move on to the next slide. So this was these two films, which are both under the theme of It Could Happen to You. And you can find them on our website. They're really incredible. One features Sabrina Butler Smith and the other features Randall Paget. And they were done in collaboration with Virgin Unite, which is Richard Branson's, organization that he does social justice work. And they have a whole anti-death penalty focus of work that they do as one of their campaigns. And so this picture is just from the premiere event, which was also on World Day Against the Death Penalty. Again, we have Celia from the Responsible Business Leaders Initiative, and Richard Branson again, and Sabrina. But please check out those films. They're a little longer, so we're not going to show them to you now. I think they're more like 8 minutes or something like that. But they're great, and we hope to have them spread as much as possible to really, again, just tell the stories of death row exonerees in a way that people won't be able to forget, and will help spread the message to each other. After you watch something so shocking, to say, the death penalty is wrong. We have to do something about it. So big shout out to Virgin Unite for all of their support and initiative in making that happen. Maybe we've been going for an hour here, so I think we better clip through these last few slides real quick. So didn't want to end without talking about, our core work in general is that, Herman and everyone else is going out and telling their stories. And so you can see the stats for yourself on the screen there. Just lots of speaking events in lots of states, lots of, whether it's legislatures or colleges or, everywhere, telling the stories over and over and over and making a difference. I don't know if there's anything you want to touch on about the speaking events, or if we'll just jump through the next few slides.
I was just looking at it. 121 speaking events and interviews. It seems like I done that alone. I haven't done that many, but the way I move around and things, it seemed like I've done that alone. I thought it was much, much more. But the great thing, as I said before, having death row exoneree speaking in an event, or for a bill or something like that, is incredible, more powerful than the average person just going in there trying to talk and tell about the death penalty and the mishaps, the miscarriages of justice, and all the stats of why we shouldn't have the death penalty in. So I think speaking engagements are very, very important. And to me personally, my personal side of this speaking events, it educate people that's our potential jurors. Every one of us death row exonerees experienced a wrongful conviction because the jury found us guilty. So I take pride into taking and going to do every event I can, so that we can get people who are potential jurors to understand how important it is to be on a jury and, know their rights. Don't be afraid to ask questions or challenge evidence, because one thing about it, and I think Juan started this, you can't free a dead man from the grave, an innocent man from the grave. You can't free him. So, it's very important that you don't put an innocent person on death row or any case. So paying attention to these things, because we also get, for me, it's training and understanding when we do A&J, which is A&J is a time when the exonerees and state attorneys and detectives and other members that on the prosecuting side meets up. They hear our stories and we answer questions for them to help them understand what they can do to prevent wrongfully convicted ones. So the stories is not here for sympathy. It's here more for education and understanding and trying to help reform our justice system in a proper way.
Absolutely. Next slide. And yes, so another really central area of our work is exoneree support. And it's the way I look at it is if we expect death row exonerees to go out and fight for folks like Julius Jones and Rodney Reed and fight for abolition in Virginia and Ohio and work for fair compensation and work for qualified immunity, on and on and on and on, all these incredible advocacies that the death row exonerees of Witness to Innocence are doing. How can they do that if they don't have the right foundation of support undergirding everything? And so it's an important part of our work. We have a full-time social worker who directs our program. We have Randall Padgett pictured here. This year he became a full-time peer specialist, specifically funded to work with the older adults who are members of Witness to Innocence. We, in the other stats here, we helped folks to get more connected to having tablets and having internet connections so that people could stay more connected during the way things are right now with less in-person stuff. And we give out emergency funds and other support. And I know you can talk to it, Herman, better than anybody because you know the meaning of it.
Well, I'm gonna put it in this term. Usually it's living in America is very hard. Things are very hard. But imagine you're being limited and unable to support yourself because of what happened to you, of what the state has done to you. For example, here it is, I've been exonerated from death row. I did not commit the crime, but yet that murder still shows my background. Every time I go for a job interview, every time I go apply for assistance, and I done got denied life insurance, Airbnb account, and trying to find a place. I'm married with 6 kids. So, it's very, very difficult for me as living. And sometimes, you have to understand it brings on a hardship, a pain to know that here it is, I have the skills and capability of doing a job, but yet I cannot get that job because that murder is still on my background check, and it's not no fault of mine. And that is where I can say I thank God for Witness Innocent with helping me get these little speaking engagements. And Lord knows I'm thankful for the emergency funds that they help support. I thank God for the mental support. I have a team. If I'm going through it or whatever, they genuinely care. I can call them and they can pick up on it right away. What's wrong, Herman? And I could talk about it. I can vent. And it makes me feel better and understand instead of going out there and doing something stupid, trying to survive or anything like this. So when you support Witness to Innocence, you're not just supporting an organization. What you're supporting and attaching to a family, because here it is, when families stick together, things are always great. And, it makes a big difference in our lives. For instance, I didn't get compensation. What happened to me. I have to thug it out. So I don't complain about it. I just educated myself and some degrees, and I further educate myself trying to build a career, working with pro bono offices and stuff like that on death penalty cases as a consultant. But it has not completely been established. So by the means of Witness to Innocence, they helps me, and they helps a whole lot. So, if you're not a part of Witness to Innocence newsletter, get the newsletters and see what we're really about, and you'll see how important it is and how thankful, appreciated we is to do have you aboard and for your support.
I think on that note, that's all we have left to say is thank you. Thank you to all of our supporters, everybody who's donated, everybody who signed a petition this year or called their legislator or called the governor in the various states where executions were happening. Thank you for being with us. And it's been a very long year, apparently. There's a lot to talk about that we took over an hour to go through all of what we did in 2021. And I'm sure we left some things out as well. I forgot to say, check out the films page on our website. That's where we've recently updated the website. So there's a special page, just the films, that includes many of the films we were already talking about here today. So thank you, everyone. And let's see more abolition and more exonerations in 2022.
And let you know, 2022, Cruel Justice will still be around.
Okay.
So long.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Herman.